The Rhine River flowed like a steel ribbon through the heart of Germany, wide and cold, its dark waters carrying centuries of history, ambition, and blood. For Adolf Hitler, it was the last natural barrier protecting the Reich. For the Allied armies, it was the final gate before the collapse of Nazi Germany. And for two men, General George S. Patton and Field Marshal Bernard Montgomery, the Rhine became something else entirely. It became a race. Winter's end. Pressure rising. March 1945 came with mud instead of snow. The winter that had nearly broken the Allied advance during the Battle of the Bulge finally loosened its grip, leaving behind ruined villages, shattered forests, and exhausted armies hungry for an ending. At Allied headquarters, maps covered the walls like living organisms, lines in red and blue crawling eastward day by day. Cigarette smoke hung thick in the air, curling beneath bare bulbs that flickered as artillery thundered somewhere far beyond the Rhine. General Dwight D. Eisenhower stood silently before the largest map, hands clasped behind his back. "The Germans are retreating faster than expected," he said finally. "They're collapsing, but that doesn't mean they're beaten." Around the table sat men who would shape the final weeks of the war: Bradley, Simpson, Hodges, and Montgomery himself, stiff-backed and immaculately dressed. And then there was Patton. He leaned back in his chair, ivory-handled pistols resting at his hips, helmet tucked under one arm. His eyes burned with impatience. "The Krauts are running," Patton said bluntly. "If we pause now, we give them time to dig in behind the Rhine. We hit them hard and fast. We don't stop until we're drinking champagne in Berlin." Montgomery's lips tightened. "This war is not won by reckless charges," Montgomery replied coolly. "It is won by preparation, method, and overwhelming force." Patton snorted. "Tell that to my Third Army." The room fell silent. Eisenhower exhaled slowly. "The plan stands," he said. "Montgomery will lead the main crossing in the north. Patton, Bradley, you continue pressing in the south. But no unauthorized Rhine crossings." Patton's jaw clenched. "Yes, sir," he said. But in his mind, another plan was already forming. 2. Patton's Third Army moves. Patton's Third Army surged eastward like a steel avalanche. Tanks roared through shattered towns. Infantry advanced through smoke and rubble, boots crunching over broken glass and spent shell casings. The Germans were no longer fighting like an army, they were fighting like fragments. Old men, boys, battered units pulled from the Eastern Front, all trying desperately to slow the inevitable. Colonel Paul Harkins rode beside Patton's command vehicle as artillery flashed on the horizon. "Resistance is lighter than we expected," Harkins said. Patton grinned beneath his helmet. "Because they don't know how fast we're coming." Every mile gained brought Patton closer to the Rhine and closer to Montgomery's carefully prepared operation. And that infuriated him. Patton believed speed was life. Montgomery believed caution saved lives. Their rivalry had simmered since North Africa, boiled in Sicily and hardened in Normandy. Each victory, each headline, sharpened the tension. Now, with Germany collapsing, the question wasn't if the Rhine would be crossed. It was who would do it first. 3. The bridge at Remagen on March 7, 1945. A single message changed everything. "Sir," an aide said breathlessly, "we've captured a bridge at Remagen." Patton froze. "A bridge?" "Yes, sir. The Ludendorff Bridge. Still standing. The First Army crossed it. Intact." Patton's eyes burned. "Goddamn. It the Rhine once thought uncrossable without massive preparation had just been breached." Montgomery would not forgive this easily, and Patton knew something else. If one bridge could survive, others might too, if orders. Ignored. Third Army headquarters. Patton stood over a map, finger tracing the southern stretch of the Rhine. "Here," he said. "Oppenheim, sir," a staff officer said carefully. "We don't have orders to cross." Patton straightened. "Did I ask about orders?" "Silence. The enemy is broken," Patton continued. "They expect us to wait. I won't give them that courtesy." "But Montgomery isn't fighting my army," Patton snapped. "I am." That night, engineers worked silently, building pontoon bridges under darkness. Infantry waited with rifles cradled, faces pale in the moonlight. The Rhine whispered beneath them. History held its breath. Crossing the Rhine 2,200 hours. Patton's Third Army crossed the Rhine. No grand announcement. No press corps. Just soldiers moving forward, boots slipping on wet planks, rifles tight in their hands. German resistance was minimal, confused, scattered, unprepared. By dawn, Patton had done what Montgomery was still planning. He had crossed the Rhine. Montgomery reacts. Montgomery received the news in his headquarters tent. He read the message once, then again. His jaw tightened. "So, he said coldly. Patton has crossed the Rhine. An aide nodded. Double quotes, yes, sir. South of Mainz. Montgomery folded the paper carefully. He was not authorized. No. Sir. Montgomery turned toward the map, eyes narrowing. This, he said quietly, is exactly why Patton cannot be trusted. Yet beneath the anger lay something else. Admiration. Patton had done it. And Montgomery knew history would remember that. Eisenhower's dilemma. Eisenhower faced an impossible choice. Reprimand Patton and risk slowing the war. Or accept the breach and undermine Montgomery's authority. He chose silence. Patton received no punishment and Montgomery received no apology. The war rolled on. Soldiers. War for the men crossing the Rhine. None of this mattered. Private James Miller vomited as artillery exploded nearby. Sergeant Thomas Green dragged a wounded comrade through mud. They fought house to house, village to village, knowing only one thing: the war was almost over, and they wanted to survive it. 9. The final drive with the Rhine behind them. Allied armies poured into Germany's heartland. Factories burned, cities fell. The Nazi command structure collapsed entirely. Patton pushed east relentlessly, his tanks racing ahead, capturing thousands of prisoners who barely resisted. Montgomery followed with methodical precision. Different styles. Same destination. Victory in silence. May 1945. Germany surrendered. The guns fell silent. The Rhine flowed peacefully again. At a quiet moment after the war, Eisenhower reflected on the crossing. Patton won the race, he admitted privately. But Montgomery ensured we finished the war. Both had been right. Both had been wrong. And history would forever remember the moment Patton beat Montgomery to the Rhine, exposing not weakness, but the fierce human tension behind Allied victory. The aftermath of the crossing Fludendorf Bridge at Remagen had become a symbol. Allied soldiers whispered about it in cold barracks, in ruined villages, in the muddy forests of the Rhineland. It was a bridge between life and death, chaos and victory, and between two very different commanders. Patton's Third Army had crossed, but the victory was as much political as it was military. Radio reports back to London and Washington framed the story as a decisive step toward Berlin, and Montgomery's face, frozen in newspapers and dispatches, betrayed barely concealed irritation. Inside Patton's temporary headquarters near Koblenz, officers scurried with new orders, maps, and intelligence reports. The walls vibrated with artillery from both sides of the Rhine, a constant reminder that the war was not yet over. Patton, always restless, paced like a caged lion. "Gentlemen," he said, slamming his hand on a map table, "don't let them slow us down. The Krauts are bleeding. If we hesitate, the war drags on, and I have no patience for hesitation." Colonel Harkins, his aide, spoke cautiously. "Sir, Montgomery has requested a meeting to discuss the next phase." Patton smiled, sharp and sardonic. "Let him wait. I didn't cross the Rhine to sit and drink tea." 2. Montgomery's calculated response across the northern sector. Montgomery held a quiet, controlled command post in a ruined German villa. His staff moved like a single organism, each member executing precise duties. Where Patton relied on speed and aggression, Montgomery relied on method and order. Every soldier, every tank, every artillery piece had a purpose. When he received the reports of Patton's Rhine crossing, Montgomery felt a mix of frustration and grudging respect. He scrawled notes in his logbook, the ink smudged with damp winter air. "This impetuous American," he wrote, "has forced our hand, yet his action may prove useful, provided discipline is maintained." Montgomery's assistant suggested a formal complaint to Eisenhower, but he shook his head. "The war is bigger than our egos. Let him cross. We will consolidate." And so, the tension simmered, invisible yet potent, like a pressure cooker on the edge of explosion. 3. Soldiers on the ground. For the soldiers in the Third Army, the rivalry of generals was a distant concern. Their world was mud, blood, and cold steel. Private James Miller, who had crossed the Rhine with Patton's forces, huddled under a makeshift tarp, cleaning his rifle. "Did you hear about Montgomery?" he asked Sergeant Green, who was bandaging a wounded comrade. Green snorted. "I care less about what some stiff Brit thinks than I do about staying alive." But in the smoke-filled villages, in the artillery barrages, the tension between commanders filtered down in subtle ways. Orders came faster than expected, supply lines strained, and soldiers felt the pace of Patton's drive. Some thrived on the momentum, others struggled with exhaustion. The river was behind them, but the war had become a test of endurance. A meeting of Titans. Weeks later, Eisenhower arranged a formal meeting between Montgomery and Patton. The generals entered a tent near the Rhine, tension hanging like fog. Montgomery, precise and immaculate, shook Eisenhower's hand, then turned to Patton with a raised eyebrow. "General Patton," he said, voice controlled, "I see your reputation precedes you." Patton's grin was wolfish. "Monty, I'd say the same. But let's not waste time on pleasantries," Eisenhower interjected. "Gentlemen, this is about coordination. The Rhine is crossed. Now we must plan the advance into Germany without needless friction." Montgomery's sharp eyes studied Patton. "Coordination requires patience, General, not reckless charging." Patton's eyes flickered, lightning quick. "Patience is a luxury, Monty. The enemy is crumbling. If we hesitate, they regroup." "I didn't come across the Atlantic to watch the Germans dig foxholes." Eisenhower remained neutral, though internally, he worried about their volatile combination. Patton's audacity and Montgomery's methodical control. 5. Into the heart of Germany. Early April 1945. Patton's Third Army tore through the Rhineland, leaving a trail of captured towns, abandoned German equipment, and demoralized soldiers. Reports of surrender came faster than expected. German forces were exhausted, leadership fragmented, and morale broken. Montgomery's forces advanced in parallel, but slower, consolidating each position before moving forward. Where Patton struck with surprise, Montgomery solidified. Together, they created a pincer effect, though neither admitted to cooperating with the other fully. The difference in tactics sparked debates among Allied intelligence officers. Some argued Patton's speed accelerated the collapse. Others feared overextension. Meanwhile, Montgomery's methodical advance secured supply lines and minimized casualties. 6. Civilians in the crossfire. In the towns and villages, civilians emerged from hiding. They were hungry, fearful, and wary of both liberators and the chaos the retreating German army left behind. Some mistook Patton's rapid advance for indiscriminate destruction, though his troops were disciplined enough to avoid unnecessary civilian casualties. Montgomery's forces were welcomed as orderly, bringing stability to the occupied areas. Yet, the juxtaposition of approaches created tension on the ground. Local German leaders tried to negotiate surrender with whichever commander they encountered first, knowing speed might save lives or doom them if they misjudged the advancing forces. 7. Intelligence and the race for Berlin. Behind the lines, Allied intelligence agencies monitored Patton and Montgomery, tracking movements, intercepting communications, and analyzing the implications of a divided approach. Patton's crossing had created an opportunity, a rapid march toward central Germany that could potentially reach Berlin before other forces, but political constraints prevented Eisenhower from allowing a single general to claim the glory of capturing the German capital. The Soviet advance from the east complicated matters, and Patton's aggressive plans risked clashing with broader Allied strategy. Montgomery, aware of these political dimensions, remained deliberate, emphasizing careful planning, public relations, and controlled occupation. Patton's personal struggles even as his army surged forward. Patton wrestled with internal conflict. His boldness won victories, but it also endangered men. Letters from family, occasional late-night thoughts of mortality, and flashes of doubt haunted him. He knew history would judge him harshly for any misstep, yet he refused to slow down speed. He muttered to Harkins one night, "Is the only way to beat history itself. Hesitate, and it crushes you." Harkins nodded, though privately he worried about exhaustion, morale, and whether Patton's relentless pace might invite catastrophe. 9. In Montgomery's perspective. Meanwhile, Montgomery observed the unfolding chaos from a distance. His approach was different, but equally effective. By consolidating positions, coordinating logistics, and emphasizing careful planning, he ensured his forces remained intact, disciplined, and strategically flexible. In private, Montgomery admitted grudging admiration for Patton's results. Publicly, he remained reserved, emphasizing professionalism, order, and the necessity of Allied unity. Climax. The German collapse. Late April. German resistance had become symbolic rather than practical. Cities surrendered, rivers flowed with retreating troops, and the once feared Wehrmacht disintegrated under relentless pressure. Patton and Montgomery's forces converged near central Germany, each with victories, each with an army fatigued but unbeaten. Allied command carefully orchestrated final advances to prevent friendly fire, ensure supplies, and manage political optics. Tensions fade. History remembers. On May 7, 1945, Germany surrendered. The guns fell silent. Across Europe, soldiers celebrated, wept, and reflected. Patton's audacity had won him fame. Montgomery's methodical planning had secured lasting stability. Both men had led thousands to victory, yet their rivalry had exposed fault lines in allied coordination, differing philosophies, and the human drama behind grand military campaigns. In quiet moments, Eisenhower mused on their dynamic. Patton strikes like lightning. Montgomery shapes the storm. Both are needed, neither can be ignored. History would remember the crossing of the Rhine not just as a military maneuver, but as a human story, a story of tension, rivalry, courage, and the fragile balance between recklessness and discipline. 12. Soldiers' Reflections. Brift Miller, now stationed near Frankfurt, reflected on the journey. "We were just kids with rifles," he said. "We didn't care about Patton or Montgomery. We just wanted to survive. But looking back, we were part of something bigger. Two generals, two armies, one war, and we were in the middle of it." Sergeant Green nodded. "Sometimes, I think they were racing for glory. Sometimes, I think they were racing to save lives. Either way, we crossed the Rhine, and that's what counts." 13. Epilogue. The Rhine flowed on, silent and eternal. Bridges rebuilt, cities restored. But the stories of March and April 1945 lived on in books, letters, and memories. Patton and Montgomery, forever linked in history, represented two sides of the same coin: audacity and caution, speed and strategy, passion and calculation. And for those who crossed the Rhine, watched the rivalry unfold, and survived the final weeks of the war, the memory remained vivid. A river divided them in geography, yet united them in destiny. A race that tested men, generals, and history itself. A story of courage, rivalry, and the human cost of victory.